Welcome to the Boulder Phil's 2022 Discovery Concert, Soundscapes, Music and Visual Art. I'm Michael Butterman, Music Director of the Boulder Phil, and I'll be your host as we take a field trip across Colorado to meet three spectacular local artists. Boulder Phil musicians will also join us to perform music by Rebecca Clark, Camille Saint-Saëns, and Aaron Copeland. And remember to visit the education page of our website, www.boulderphil.org, to download a Soundscapes curriculum guide with fun music and art themed activities. And now, on with the show. Artist Judi Dressler was born in Germany and moved to England as a baby. After spending time in Johannesburg, South Africa and Canada, her family moved to the United States when Judy was 14 years old. Today, she is a fine art photographer based in Louisville, Colorado. Most of Judy's work was shot in Louisville or in Colorado locations near her home, like Boulder, Longmont, Denver, Littleton, Lakewood, the Pawnee Grasslands, Barr Lake State Park, Ray, and Walden. But Judy has also photographed landscapes and wildlife in other states, such as Arizona, California, Texas, Minnesota, South Carolina, Alaska, and more. Judy has won many art photography awards, including a gold medal from the Peregrine Fund, the Special Tamarind Image Award from the Colorado Environmental Film Festival, the Grand Prize from Matador Media's Feather Focus Contest, and an honorable mention from National Wildlife Federation. Judy's work was selected as the cover photo for Colorado Outdoors Magazine's November-December 2021 issue, their annual photography issue. One of her photographs was featured in the 2021 Audubon calendar. Judy has also held shows in Boulder at the Avalon Ballroom and the National Center for Atmospheric Research, and has exhibited her work at Boulder's R Gallery. Judy sells her photographs as high-quality prints that can be hung as beautiful artworks. She also makes her own yearly bird photo calendars, sells her work on greeting cards, mugs, and t-shirts, and teaches classes on photography. In college, Judy studied math, science, and education, but she always loved the arts. She said, "I'm very much a classical music lover. I grew up with practically nothing but classical music, which in my home meant actually sitting and listening, no talking aloud." Her mother was an accomplished classical pianist, and her father played the cello and a little piano. Judy says, "Sometimes they invited musical friends, and as a child, I would go to sleep listening to a quartet playing chamber music." Judy herself played the cello for 5 years until, when she was 12 years old, her cello blew off the top of the family car and smashed onto the freeway. She also played recorder and majored in piano for a year at Metro State University in Denver. Judy loves lots of classical music, especially the music of Polish composer and pianist Frédéric Chopin. For a few years, Judy's enthusiasm as a classical music fan intersected with her work life when she served as technology coordinator for the College of Music at CU Boulder. But it was Judy's love of nature photography that became her outlet for creating art, and that's where she has found her purpose. Judy says, "I started photographing birds when my partner at the time was putting out peanuts for the squirrels on our deck railing, but blue jays came and stole them. I loved the jays. That was about 8 years ago. Soon I put out more bird seed to see which birds would come and tried to photograph them all. I love trying to capture the personalities of wildlife. With birds, I especially love capturing action and interaction and showing off their beauty." Judy's photographs feature both action shots and still images. Some of the subjects of her work are four-legged creatures, such as porcupines, mountain goats, bison, foxes, bighorn rams, and wild mustangs from Sandwash Basin, Colorado. Some of her images feature landscapes, though those photographs may also contain wildlife. But most of Judy's artwork stars birds, like this mallard, these quail, this roadrunner, this tern, these grebes, this hummingbird, these owls, this pelican, and these eagles. Some of the birds that Judy photographs fly up to 200 miles per hour. Judy says, "My appreciation and admiration for birds has grown immensely. They are so amazing. Their lives are really difficult, what with incessantly having to look out for predators, becoming parents and building nests, sitting on eggs, feeding and looking after their babies, migrating great distances, which is an incredible feat, and more. And they are so like us in terms of caring about their partners and families, grieving a lost mate, having to learn how to master all sorts of feats, communicating with one another, squabbles with one another, and even occasionally having fun." Though most of Judy's artwork features wildlife, she also creates charismatic portraits and action shots of people's pets. Just like music can express character and spirit, Judy can capture the personality of a pet by using her artistic skills to snap the perfect frisbee catch. Judy says her goal is to capture some of the marvel and personality of wildlife. She hopes that anyone who sees her wildlife photography will find a deeper appreciation of the natural life that surrounds us. In a world where species are disappearing at an alarming rate due to habitat loss, climate change, and a host of other man-made challenges, Judy hopes that her artwork will inspire others to protect our natural habitats and the animals that live there, especially those here in the American West. So Judy, I want to talk a little bit about how you got started as a photographer. Did you always enjoy taking pictures? And when did you know you wanted to be an artist?
No, I have not always done photography. Mm-hmm. I started taking pictures when I used to hike and ski a lot in the mountains of Colorado, and capture the beauty of the mountains.
Right.
But I wasn't really serious about it until I finally started photographing birds.
So it wasn't necessarily an evolution from you being, let's say, an illustrator or a painter when you were, a young child. This was something that you came to really through your experience out in nature. Then,
well, yeah. Although I have always had an artistic side, so even when I was a teenager, I wanted to become a children's book illustrator. That was the job I wanted to have.
Yeah.
I wanted it to, do little drawings of children catching balls and things like that.
Right.
But my dad talked me out of it. He said it wasn't a real job. I needed a real job. But I've always been interested in artistic things. I've always enjoyed them. I've done stained glass. For a while I made candles of all different shapes and colors, and then and then I was a website designer, and then so I've always leaned towards artistic stuff.
Yeah, sure. So the birds then that you're photographing, where do you find them? Where do you know to look for them?
Well, at first I really didn't. I started getting more birds coming to my deck because I put out different bird feeders, different bird seed, and I looked to see what birds would come.
Right.
So that was the start, and then I started thinking, well, where can I find birds? So I went out with birding groups because there are birders, and they go out and look for birds, and I would trail along with them. Oh. But that was a start, and then I just noticed you would go someplace and you'd see a great blue heron in a pond, and I realized, okay, I can go back here and see that great blue heron because that bird keeps coming back.
Right.
You know, and I just met other bird photographers like Rob, who knew where certain owls were and would tell me, and got to be friends with some of them, so they'd give away some of their secrets.
Right.
So over time, you just start to realize you'll find out more and more.
Sure. Well, whether it's birds or any kind of wildlife, how are you able to photograph them without scaring them away?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, that's one reason for this lens.
I was thinking it must be, yeah.
It gets you close enough, but you still have to really work at trying to minimize, as you said, because birds fly away. They're always scared of us.
Sure.
And other animals also, although birds are the worst. So, you know, a lot of times people don't realize, if you go someplace where there are lots of little birds, for instance, and you go over, they'll fly away. But if you just sit down and wait patiently for maybe 15 minutes, they'll come back.
Yeah.
You know, so a lot of it's patience. You know, they're also, and you can also sometimes move closer, but you have to do it very slowly. You don't want to make eye contact with the bird, because otherwise that's predatory behavior. So kind of never let the bird think you're actually looking at it.
Right.
You can be in a blind in your car, for instance. I shoot from my car a lot, because there they don't see all of you, they just see a little bit of you.
Right.
And that's a lot less scary for them, so you can get a lot closer in.
So what kinds of things are you thinking about as you're taking these photographs? I mean, obviously the technical things like, you know, trying to sort of stay as unobtrusive as possible, but are you thinking about other technical things like, how much light exposure am I going to be using here, or what kind of framing do I want, or what's going through your mind as you're taking these photos?
There's a lot, yeah, because the light that you mentioned, exactly, the light is really huge. Light is everything.
Sure.
And so you want the sun behind you most of the time. You want the sun behind you, and you want the sun low in the sky, so you get that beautiful light, because when it's high in the sky, it casts ugly shadows on everything. And then light is constantly a factor. So, you know, if I want to get pictures of birds in flight, I need a very fast shutter speed, and for a fast shutter speed, I need more light. And so I have to constantly play with the settings. And there's other things too. For instance, I might want to adjust my depth of field. So if I want to get more than one subject at a time, I need a greater depth of field.
So just like a musician, you have an instrument, if you will, a tool that you use in your art. I'm wondering whether you are constantly maintaining your cameras and your lenses, or are you constantly looking for the next best piece of equipment somehow, or are you sort of happy with what you have?
Oh, the next best piece of equipment is always out there, but it's so expensive. So right now, I'm pretty happy with what I have. As far as taking care of it, I mean, one thing, I have to always remember to charge the batteries before any shoot. I have to remember to put my memory card in there, because if I forget those things, I'm out of luck.
Right, of course.
The sensor has to be cleaned from time to time.
Sure.
You know, if I go on a trip, I'll also clean the glass, make sure all the glass parts are clean.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's not too high maintenance.
Yeah. So I'm wondering a little bit about your evolution, I guess, over time as a photographer. When we're musicians and we're starting out, we play our instruments in one way, but certainly as we gain more experience and more skill, we find ourselves doing things differently. Is the same true for you? I mean, how has your photography and how has your approach changed over time?
Yeah, that is absolutely true. When I look back now at the pictures I first took, I mean, at the time I thought they were great, you know, not all of them, of course, but I thought some of them were great. But now I look at those and like delete.
Oh, no.
Yeah, because you do really learn, you gradually things that make your photography better.
So I'm wondering about actually the editing process. I know there's, in my understanding, probably at least two components to this, right? You have to actually get the shot that you're looking for, but then there is a process that can happen afterwards, where you maybe are cropping it, or maybe tell me a little bit about what kind of editing you do to your photos once you've taken them.
Right. So I run all my photos through a program called Adobe Lightroom. And in there, I can make little adjustments to light and shadows and highlights. I can adjust the darkness and lightness a little bit of the picture, especially if there's distracting elements. I might crop them out in Photoshop.
Sure.
But one thing is for sure, which is that you can't beat a photo that was good in the first place. You'll never be able to make up, if you take a bad photo, you can improve it a little bit, but you'll never make it as good as had you taken a good photo in the first
Yes,
place.
I can imagine. Right.
So
let's shift gears for a second. I know you're not always photographing animals out in the natural world. Sometimes you're doing actually pet photo shoots. Tell me about how you plan those.
yeah, I love doing that. And if someone asks me, I have a lot of questions for the pet owner. You know, for instance, if it's a dog, is it a young dog? Does it like to run around? Do you want pictures of it running around? Do you want pictures indoors, outdoors? Do you want pictures with your pet?
Right.
You know, what kind of poses do you want funny pictures?
Sure.
So
right.
there's a bunch of, questions like that.
Yeah.
And does the dog come if you call it? Because if the dog doesn't come when you call it, it's going to be a lot harder.
Indeed. Yeah, right. A little bit like photographing babies sometimes, I suppose. They don't always cooperate.
They don't always cooperate.
Right,
That's
exactly.
true. Just when you want them to smile, they cry instead.
Right, exactly. Well, you have a lot of funny names for some of your photos. Do those just come to you somehow, or how does that work?
Yeah, funny names they definitely draw people in, but sometimes I think of them right away. Sometimes I don't. It takes me a while. But sometimes I just put it on Facebook. I'll ask people, can you think of a caption for this? And so I'll get other people to supply my captions.
Since we're exploring music and art, I'm wondering how you conceive of music and art as being connected, or music and photography, for that matter, as being connected. Is there a connection that you feel?
I think there's a lot of connection, actually. Well, first of all, I think that music enhances imagery always. Like, if you go to the movies, can you imagine a movie with no music?
Exactly.
It would be dead
Right.
compared to the way it is. You know, with music, you have your composer, and then you have the musicians who play the music. So you could be either one of those, right?
Right.
Or I guess you could also be someone who embellishes the music a little bit, or like a jazz musician kind of flies with it.
Sure.
And so for me as a photographer, in a way, the art's already been created. It's here,
Yeah.
And so I get to photograph what I see, and I feel like embellish on it a little bit to make it perhaps a bit more beautiful in the way that I want to present it to the world.
Very interesting. So as a musician, you're constantly thinking about tempo, you're thinking about timing, essentially. And in your case, you have to think about that as well. I mean, I'm wondering when you know that this is the moment I want to press, to take the photo. Or are you actually taking bursts of images and sorting through them and just finding just the perfect moment? How does that work for you?
Yes, you are exactly right. I take bursts. I do burst photography. I have it in continuous mode all the time.
Okay.
I think, when you get to know the animal or bird that you're photographing, that helps a lot, because you'll become more familiar with their behavior and what certain behavior means. Like they will, because birds want to be light, they will often poop right before they fly.
Okay.
Because that means, okay, now I'm lighter. So there's a little signal, okay, get my camera ready, But anything at all that's kind of interesting. And a lot of times there is nothing interesting going on. You just wait for a while, while the bird's sitting there doing its thing.
Yeah, you have to be patience, I imagine, is important in your line of work. Yeah.
Yes, you do have to be patient. And sometimes it's long periods of patience with nothing happening, and then suddenly lots and lots of action.
Right.
So
fantastic.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I love it.
I can see that you do. Well, we have loved talking with you and seeing some of your work. I really appreciate you being part of our Discovery program this year, and just want to thank you for sharing with us.
Oh, thank you, Michael. I really appreciate your taking the time with me.
Absolutely.
It's been really fun.
Well, I'm here with Rob, who is a falconer, and we have with us today a friend of yours. Who is this?
This is Medusa.
Medusa, fabulous. And how old is Medusa?
Medusa is a little less than a year old.
Amazing. And you have with you, it looks like a little something for her to eat. Am I correct?
Yes, she's got raw whole quail.
So while she's enjoying this, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the drone that you use. What's the purpose of that?
Well, the drone is used to basically get the bird to fly high. The hunting part of falconer is really what you what every falconer wants to do. They're just not a bird that you just keep and fly them at a drone, although there are people that do that. But most of them, they hunt. They want to train their bird to hunt ducks or pheasants or grouse or pigeons, even pigeons. And depending on the size of the bird, they'll chase lots of different stuff.
Yeah.
And see how quickly she ate that?
I
mean,
she was hungry, I guess. As a photographer, Judy has to practice patience and persistence. She tries again and again until she gets an image that she likes. Just like learning to play an instrument means trying again and again until you can make the sounds that you like. Then she continues to edit the photo to make it even better, just like musicians keep practicing and improving a piece of music until it's ready to perform. Part of Judy's mission is to capture the personalities of her subjects, and she highlights these personalities through the fun titles that she gives her works. This is something you can try at home. Maybe you can photograph your own pet with your parents' cell phone camera, or take pictures of the birds and the squirrels in your neighborhood. And maybe your family can go on your own photo safari at the zoo. Then pick the best pictures showing the most personality and give them a fun name. Another part of Judy's mission is to use her art to inspire people to value natural places and their inhabitants. This is similar to another artistic champion of the American West, composer Aaron Copeland. Part of Copeland's goal as a composer was to create an American sound in classical art music. He was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1900. Copeland began creating songs in his head when he was about 8.5 years old and started writing them down by the time he was 11. His instrument was the piano, but by the age of 15, Copeland had already decided that he wanted to be a composer. At 21, he moved to Paris for 3 years to study with the famous French composition teacher Nadia Boulanger. Studying with Boulanger was one of the most important musical influences on Copeland's work. After this time in France, Copeland moved back to New York to teach, compose, and to give lectures about classical music. In the late 1930s, Copeland began to compose pieces that described the American West and small-town American life. Works like Billy the Kid, El Salón Mexico, and film scores for Of Mice and Men, Our Town, and The Red Pony. He wrote some of his most famous works in the 1940s, such as Rodeo, which includes the well-known Hoedown, Fanfare for the Common Man, Lincoln Portrait, and his celebrated ballet, Appalachian Spring, commissioned by American modern dance legend Martha Graham. Copeland said, "When I wrote Appalachian Spring, I was thinking primarily about Martha and her unique choreographic style, which I knew well. And she's unquestionably very American. There's something prim and restrained, yet simple and strong about her, which one tends to think of as American." There's a piece of music by Copeland in your curriculum guide that was written during the 1940s, Sunday Traffic, from the composition Music for Movies. This piece was composed as movie music for the film The City. Copeland's duo for flute and piano, from which we'll hear the third movement, was also based on musical ideas that he sketched out in the 1940s and sounds like his other American-style compositions from that time. Now, this piece was commissioned, meaning that Copeland was hired to write this music in advance. In 1967, William Kincaid, the principal flutist of the Philadelphia Orchestra, passed away, and 70 of his students and friends paid Copeland to compose this duo for flute and piano in Kincaid's honor. Today, we're going to hear Elizabeth Sadilek-Labenski, the Boulder Philharmonic's principal flutist, performing with Sara Parkinson, the executive director of the Boulder Philharmonic, playing the piano. They will play the third movement of Copeland's duo for flute and piano called Lively with Bounce. While we listen and consider how the spirit of Copeland's music celebrates the American West, we'll also watch Judy in action as she photographs a bird of prey flying nimbly across the sky.